So I want to share some perspectives around choices and consequences. And in order to do so, I'm going to borrow from the intentionality model because it speaks to the outcomes that we get depending on what choices we make. So choices and consequences. Ultimately in life, I believe that the majority of us, if not all of us, would like to achieve success, however you define success. But we call that positive consequences. And we want to avoid the negative consequences, which we also call failure. Now, we all have, in essence, the same amount of time, at least in the short term. We don't know what the future holds, but we have the same amount of time. Let's assume that for a second. And it all begins with choices. Life goes on, and you've got an opportunity to make a choice. And in fact, you are making choices all day long. You're making choices about where you go, what way you drive to work, whether you go to work, what you eat in the morning, what time you get up, whether you smile at people. There are just choices galore. And the question is, how do you utilize those choices? Because in the intentionality model says those choices result in actions. Otherwise, you just stay still. But let's assume for a second that your choices result in actions of some kind that move you forward in time. And if your choices result in positive actions and you keep repeating positive actions, they will ultimately lead to positive consequences. And if you make choices that result in negative actions or inaction even, it leads to negative consequences or failure. But that can even be brought down to a micro element of a period of time where we can say during that period of time, what choices and actions did I make? And sometimes we don't know whether those actions will turn out to be positive or negative. All we can do is see over time whether they resulted in more of what we wanted or less of what we wanted. But here's the key point to the whole thing. It's important for us to get perspective around whether those actions led to something positive or something negative. And the challenge we have is that when we find ourselves on this, call it a downward spiral, where we've made choices that led to negative actions, if we don't ultimately own it, if we don't take ownership over our choices and our actions, we will not learn the things that we need to learn so that we can adjust the choices so that the actions also adjust. And if we don't take ownership, if we instead blame somebody else, we deflect because we don't want to own it, maybe we become defensive, maybe we use excuses. Whatever the reason is, those are all ways basically that we want to be impervious to the feedback or to the knowledge or the understanding that I had something to do with the consequences because of my choices and my actions. And if I want to blame the environment for things that ended up negative, even though I meant it for good, it doesn't matter on the consequences. The consequences may still end up negative. So today I really want you to think about the things that you do, make better choices, and the way you can know whether you're making good choices or not is to whether they are leading to better consequences or worse consequences. Let's say that you sell cars. If in a month's time you end up selling 2 cars, and you look back on the month and you say, well, I came into work, I had my coffee, I chatted with a lot of different people, I looked on my phone, looked through social media, I did all kinds of things, but it did not result in me calling customers, prospecting, reaching out to my past customers and people I just sold and saying thank you and doing the actions. Don't be surprised if you get the negative consequences. But if you are doing the actions and they're not leading to these results, then instead of blaming the system or blaming the environment or blaming something, take ownership over it and say, listen, I didn't do the right things. I intended to do the right things. They didn't result in the positive action and the positive consequences. So therefore, there must be something else I need to do in order to get better results. But unless we stop and own it and reflect on the things that we have done, we won't know whether our actions were in fact positive or negative, and we won't know what adjustments to make. But if we're on this trajectory and we don't make corrections in the things that we do, we will continue to keep getting what we're getting. So the great thing is that we are powered with choice, but we also have to recognize our choice comes with consequences. And when you find yourself on the wrong end of those consequences, simply own it. Don't push it aside or deflect it onto something else. And when you own it, learn what you need to learn from it and adjust your behavior, and you will get better results.